Okay, so welcome to the third session in the Working Smarter group. I guess you all know me, Peter Taylor, so welcome to this discussion. Discussion is going to be about project sponsorship. So we talked last week about, we touched on it during the conversations about project sponsorship, and so I said I would talk about that. It is potentially a kind of a two-parter, so we'll see where we go with today's conversation. If it's still of interest, there is a kind of follow-up part to the project sponsorship conversation about how you actually improve project sponsorship inside your own organization. So we'll see how that goes. So thank you for joining. And what I want to kick off with is a little bit of a personal thing. So I'm going to take a couple of minutes here. I've launched something. I don't know if you've seen this. I know some of you have. But I've launched something called the 21 Days Challenge. It just struck me. I was seeing a lot of conversations from people who were having time, were finding new ways of working, overcoming the challenges that I think all of us have experienced. And so I thought, well, it'd be great if we can capture this. And I came up with the title of the Projectless Manager, because some project managers don't have any direct activities at the moment, and some are delayed, some are suspended. And so I thought it's a great idea. And the idea is it's a 21-day challenge. It started on Monday, so we're into day 2. And it is to write, edit, and publish a new book for change leaders around the world based on their experience, your experiences of the last few weeks, a kind of a lockdown legacy. It's been broken. I don't actually know where the book's going to go. That's the exciting thing. So, but broadly, I'm thinking about, well, there must be some lessons learned from working remotely right now, some kind of legacy lessons from the lockdown period. I know it's not over yet, but that's a lot of things have been learned already. And the second part is lessons that we can think about for the future about what may change. And the third one is just a wild card. So if you have any idea of a short article, and what I'm looking for is nothing more than 500 words, and it's just if you're interested, then on LinkedIn. Send me a message and I'll send you the short document that describes the timeline and the process. But really, we're moving very fast because this book will be published on the 11th of May. And so the writing has to be done by the 30th of April before I move into an edit phase and take it from there. So I need contributors. If you can contribute, that'd be fantastic. But also, please, go and find. Well, there is the article inside the Tribe site as well, and you can certainly comment on that, but also to share it on LinkedIn. I already have over 50 contributors from around the world, which is amazing. But I want more. I want plenty more. So there's lots of opportunity there. All right. Thank you for that moment. I'm going to talk about strategies for project sponsorship. Keep calm and sponsor projects is the key thing. And this is a big topic for me. It's a very important topic, I feel, because so much has gone on in the world of project management to make things better, to improve things. But sponsorship has kind of lagged behind, is my view on this. And let me explain why I believe this. The whole thing, everything you need to know about project sponsorship can be described in 3 numbers. And that's it. It just encapsulates the state of project sponsorship around the world today, I believe. Not absolutely everywhere. There are some companies that have good project sponsors. There are some great project sponsors out there, of course. But I did some research a while back for a book, and the research uncovered an interesting sort of, I don't know, it's an interesting contradiction almost. So, as part of the research for the book, we surveyed a significant number of companies around the world, different scales, different sizes, different industries, and we asked a lot of questions, but we asked them 3 main questions. And the first question we asked is, do you have project sponsors in place? And out of all the organizations that we reached out to, 85% came back and said, yes, we have project sponsors. Which is a good thing, I guess. It means 85% they recognize project sponsors. Now, we used a very, very broad definition of project sponsor. It was, senior reporting officer, executive sponsor, project sponsor, program sponsor, a broad definition to grab as much collective data as possible. And out of all the companies we reached out to who responded for the survey, it was 85% said, yes, we have project sponsors in place. Thumbs up, good job, well done. You do wonder what the 15% were doing, because they were running projects, so we're not quite sure what that happens with them and how they're getting on. But 85%, you say that's a good number. It's a positive number. Always room for improvement, of course. But, it's a great start. 85% have project sponsors. Excellent. Well, then we asked the second question. We said, okay, what do you do to support, to train, to develop, to mentor, to guide, to help those project sponsors you have inside your organization? And 83% of those companies came back and said, nothing. We do nothing at all. There is this belief that you can just be a project sponsor, that you do not need to be trained or have any experience. You are just a project sponsor because you've reached a certain level inside your organization of seniority. And that is a startling statement, really. 83% did absolutely nothing. Now, and again, I will say this, and I've worked with some companies, and I've seen some really good programs of development for project sponsors. But I've equally been into organizations, some a little bit more, if you like, autocratic, centralized, governed, old school, top-down approach, very centralized companies do not recognize this in any particular way as an important part of the job that these senior people do. They have, they have the nominated title of project sponsor for the sort of projects, but they haven't got a clue how to be project sponsors. So 85% have project sponsors in place. Good. Improvement, but good. 83% said we do nothing to help, support, guide, mentor, or develop our project sponsors. And then the killer. We said, okay, how important do you think it is to have a project sponsor in place, a good project sponsor in place inside your organization to lead the projects? 100% of the people came back from the survey and said yes. Well, I'll be honest, it wasn't 100, it was 99.5%, but I'm rounding up for simplicity. Everybody said yes, it's really important to have a good project sponsor. And there's the contradiction. There's the the moment where you go, what on earth is going on here? 85% have sponsors. Hopefully that number is constantly increasing. 83% of organizations did absolutely nothing to do anything to help people be successful project sponsors, and everybody thinks it's really important to have a good project sponsor in place. Well, yeah, this I believe is the world that we're in. I've described it, based on my own personal experience of being an accidental project manager. When I entered the world of project management, I really had no clue. I wasn't even called a project manager, and it was years later I realized I was a project manager. And it was years after that I was called a project manager, and years after that I was actually sent on a course to learn how to be a project manager. But the accidental project managers are significantly less these days. There's so much out there for project managers, whether they be training courses, certification, guides, communities, books, videos, webinars, training courses, conferences, communities, PMO, all the rest of it. There's a lot to help newbies, new project managers to enter and develop their skills. But there is nothing out there in general for project sponsors. So I believe we are right now in the age of the accidental project sponsor. And that's not a good thing. That's a very risky thing, because these people are supposedly ultimately responsible for the success or failure of these projects. These projects have a significant cost to them, and that cost itself is linked to strategic intentions of an organization, and yet they're in the hands of people who are, in general, unskilled and unprepared and unsupported to be able to do that. And I'll be interested after I finish talking to get your insights into your own organizations or organizations you've worked with about how you see this working, how your own experiences are. But there's kind of some more. This is it's a fairly old one now. It's a Project Management Institute Pulse of the Profession. I liked it because it was the first kind of pulse that they produced that really quantified things, and I liked it because it also talked about project sponsors. And PMI then said that organisations with active project sponsors, and they define what they mean by that, you just think of it as a good project sponsor who knows what they're doing, they're more likely to have better project outcomes. And at that point, you know, you can see the difference, you know, meeting goals and intent, you know, quite a significant difference in the projects that have actually sponsors and those that don't. Within budget, staying within budget, sponsors seem to have a good impact there, positive impact. On time, same again. Experiencing scope creep, I mean, the opposite, of course, which is what you want, is that, you know, with active sponsors in place, that scope creep was controlled to a greater level. Certainly probably challenged to a greater level when decisions were made. And then the one on the far right there, the projects are deemed complete failures. You know, with a good sponsor in place, it's 12%. And you might say that's a terrible figure. Well, yeah, it is. But look at it without a good project sponsor in place, it's more than double that. So that's an interesting statement, I think, or an interesting concept. And you know, a great way of doing this, I think, is if you think about this and you go into that report, what it talks about is that there is actually a 29% variance of meeting your project goals by having a good sponsor in place. And there is a 13% negative variance of complete project failure without a good project sponsor in place. So a great way of looking at this, and something you could possibly do, is if you can work out your portfolio value, and I have a whole nother conversation and presentation around the you know, working out what the true portfolio value is. But let's say you know what your portfolio, or you believe you know what your portfolio is, and I can assure you it's more than you think. But you know, use these numbers here. So let's say your portfolio is just £5 million. I'm using pounds here; it doesn't matter. Again, 5 million, whatever it may be. So what we're looking at is that if you have a good project sponsor in place, then you are increasingly protecting 1.45 million of that 5 million. I mean, overall, you're protecting it a bit more. But if you think about that, plus 29% variance, it's 1.45 million. But you're equally having, like, you know, 13% negative. You are, without having a good project sponsor, you know, you are almost guaranteed to waste 650,000 of that portfolio, and that's at 5 million. If it's 10 million, these are the numbers: 2.9 million, 1.3 million wasted. Look at that red number there. 50 million. This is, again, we're not talking about monstrously large portfolios. Certainly, you know, most organisations I work with are probably into this kind of region. And actually, when you work out the true value of the portfolio, and that's something we can cover another day if people are interested in that. If you know, your true portfolio value is easily at that level. Even with a much lower figure of what you think. But let's just stick with this one. So here's the conversation you can kind of have. You know, 50 million portfolio value. That means with the good project sponsors in place, you're super protecting. It's like you've got extra added insurance on 14.5 million of that portfolio, which is great. But the other one figure is, well, if you don't have good project sponsors, well, 6.5 million is potentially going to be wasted completely. Now, this is I love to use this. Like, you know, when I hear, you know, arguments of, well, we can't afford the time, or we can't afford the money to actually develop our project sponsors, they're busy people, etc., etc. Maybe we could have like an hour or something, you know, over lunch to talk about sponsorship. You know, when you can put a figure like 6.5 million there, that really should make people sit up and pay more attention, I believe. For example, you know, wouldn't you love to have a conversation? Go and find your chief financial officer and go, hey, we haven't got good sponsors inside this organisation, and our portfolio is worth 50 million. So what I want you to do is I want you to go and get 6.5 million out of the bank in cash, and we're going to sit there and have a happy afternoon slowly putting these notes through the shredding machine, because you are going to waste that amount of money by not investing in project sponsors. And therefore, you know, when you look at a program of development for project sponsors, and I said earlier, you know, I'm happy to talk that through, you know, maybe next week on the second session about the kind of approach that I personally have found has worked in the organisations I've stepped in and helped in this area. But you know, even when you're talking about X thousand pounds or dollars or whatever it may be to invest in sponsorship development over a period of time. And even if you count if you effectively the lost time for these executives to actually attend the training and try and improve their skills, it is nothing. It pales into insignificance compared to that negative 13%. So it's a powerful argument, I think, of getting the attention from executives inside your organisations. There's another group, Standish. I love. So I have a love-hate relationship with the Standish group. They produce the Chaos Manifesto year after year. They're the people who actually think still that a project has to be delivered on time, to budget, and to scope for it to be successful. I think if you have any experience as a project manager, you know that isn't actually the case. But they produced another I think really quite a good document, which was around the year of the executive sponsor. It was one of their Chaos Manifesto publications. And they quite rightly stated the most important person on the project is the executive sponsor. And, I'm very sorry, project managers, we know we're important, but actually the executive sponsor is ultimately responsible for the success and failure of the project. And so they are the most important person. And what we can see here is, they were asked a number of questions, and it was a very large survey. But IT executives were asked what percentage of their project's executive sponsors knew how to be good executive sponsors, and their answers indicated there, as you can see, only 33% are considered good or above. It's really quite kind of a low figure. So, what they was said in this report that actually 67% were not good executive sponsors, which is clearly a very worrying position. Standish also talked about the factors for success in projects, and this kind of the executive management support was deemed right at the very top. This is sponsorship they're talking about at this point. You have to read the report to understand the scoring, etc. And they also found this. They asked these senior executives what was the total maximum time that they spent or devoted to the executive sponsor role over all the projects and programs. And just look at that green part of the top pie chart there. 62% of them spent less than 5% of their time. That's just incredible. Now, it's expected a senior executive work longer hours. The average week could be 60 hours or so, but that's like about four hours a week on projects. And so the projects are often have got to be the most significant things going on. Business as usual is critical, of course, but it's the projects that bring about change, and it might be projects that are regulatory projects that can cause certainly fines on organisations, as legal situations. Some regulatory situations can actually get the executives put in prison if they don't get it right. And if it's changes for strategical and tactical improvements to the business, well, again, it's important. So why would you spend so little time? It's like senior executives don't see this as the day job. They see this as an extra, a burden, something on top of their day job. And again, the lower one just talks about how they learned to be executive sponsors, and 80% effectively were saying that they had on-the-job training. A very tiny 1% had any formal training, and a worrying 90% weren't quite sure if they've ever been trained or not. Again, that's kind of disturbing, I think. And the final one is PwC on the insights and trends. Senior management supports PM-driven key initiatives to achieve stronger business results. What it was saying here is, and I discount the top one. I'm thinking, poor estimates, missed deadlines. Well, that's not a contributor. That's a result. So I don't really understand that one. But therefore, I think actually lack of executive sponsorship on this particular report, which was the insights and trends on current portfolio program and project management practices. Lack of executive sponsorship was right up there as well. And so I just, I kind of summarize it. It's kind of like it's just a challenge. It's just a worrying situation. And with that, as ever, I'm going to drop this shortly. Well, thank you for your listening to this. And hopefully, as I said, the idea of these sessions is to give you some sort of inspiration, is hopefully find us some new friends and throw up some ideas and challenges. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to close this down. And I'm going to bring this back up. And I'm going to actually turn my video on. There we go. And I'm going to put us into out of lecture mode and into unmute state. Let's see how that works. Okay, no, we do have a lot of background noise.
Yeah,
so
like in the next half an hour, right? I mean,
right, so the way it's set up now is, I'm ready for the conversation from you guys, so I'm looking for your insights, your thoughts, your agreements, your disagreements. If you want to speak up, just unmute yourself, have the conversation, and then if you could put yourself back on mute again, that would be great. So, let's start off with, did anything I said actually surprise anybody, or is this your own experiences? And feel free to agree or disagree, all that's fine, don't mind. Who's going to be brave enough to go first?
Peter, this is Parak. I agree that most sponsors in the executive area look at it as an add-on chore. In my experience with oil and chemical industries, executives will attend the first meeting or two, and then they'll look for reports, and it'll just be something that you have to get them to read, and they'll get very interested if you raise a problem. We're behind schedule, or we've run into this technical issue or something, and then basically they want things to run. They say, don't bother me unless there's an issue, I think.
Right, yeah.
The other point, the work I'm going to be doing now is going to be consulting for small companies. And I was just thinking as you were talking, I would love to have a one-page cheat sheet or something that I can give to my potential clients to say, look, when we kick off this project, here's what I'm expecting on your end. Your executive sponsor has to be aware there's a timeline for making decisions. When you delay, everything gets delayed. So I'd say a précis or a job description of what's the requirement to be a good executive sponsor. That would be really helpful to have, to pull out. Thanks.
I have one. So what I do is I will post it up on the group forum after the event. Now it's interesting when I hang on, 1 minute, let me just finish this bit. When I worked on this, and I talked, I worked with a couple of other people on this kind of survey and the information around the book. We found at the end of the draft, we found that we had, I can't remember now, so about 13 different versions of a checklist of what a sponsor should be. And we had a lot of time arguing and discussing, and arguing, of course, about. So what I will put up there is what we ended up with, which is 17 suggested responsibilities of a project sponsor. So, feel free to take it, feel free to convert it to your own language because it uses certain terminology, like project charter and things. Feel free to change it, add something to take things away. If you go to if you go and track down that Standish report, the Chaos Manifesto report, they have about 50. Now, to me, that was too many. It's kind of a mixture between responsibilities and attributes of the sponsor, attitudes and attributes, I would say. But, okay, I will certainly and happily post that up there on the tribe site, on the group forum, either tonight or tomorrow morning, one of the two. And, feel free to take it and have a look and see if it is useful. Okay. Gabrielle, were you coming in to say something?
Yes. Can you hear me? I have a lot of background noise here now, so hold on a second.
Okay.
So my experience has been that a lot of project sponsors think they're doing a good job. Mm-hmm. And when you give them the list of things that they are supposed to do, they feel like they're doing them.
Yeah.
But they're not doing enough of it. And also their interpretation of what it means to doing a task is not what the team expects them to do.
Right.
So what I have done on one project, and it was, again, not ideal, that I said, these are the responsibilities, and these are the actions that you need to take. And that's what the outcome needs to be. So, for example, is need to be involved in the project. It means attending team meetings at least once a week and being physically present. So what it created for the project sponsor, a little bit more of something they could measure themselves on. Am I actually doing what the team requires me to do?
Okay.
But even having said that, I find it very difficult because senior management will always say, I'm hiring you to do this. I can just give you so much time.
Yeah, I recognise that. I recognise that completely. And this is the kind of issue with this situation is that, you know, project managers should not be educating project sponsors during the project about what the project sponsor should be doing. They sponsors certainly wouldn't be expecting to teach a project manager how to be doing their part of the job. But, you know, so in the perfect world, that all needs to be done beforehand and outside of the projects themselves. And if we get on to, you know, as I said, next week, if we get on to talking about the kind of sponsorship maturity roadmap that you can try and put in place, that's what that kind of is about trying to address. I think from a project manager's point of view, at least if you understand the sponsor you're working with and what their attitude is and what's their competencies, you can begin to understand what the pressures are going to be on you. And, you know, it gives you an opportunity to potentially lean on your team a little more. I mean, it's wrong in the sense that the sponsor should do the sponsor job and the project manager should do the project management job. But at least if you know what you're dealing with, you know what it is you should be compensating. But it doesn't mean you can do everything, because sometimes there are some high-level decisions, some high-level influencing activities are required, some real senior stakeholder management activities that only a true executive sponsor can do, and a project manager, you know, just can't reach that part of the organisation. So it's never perfect. It's never perfect at all. Anybody else have any positive or negative experiences on project sponsorship?
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
It's Michael.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Michael.
Hi. Okay, so my experience, a lot of my project sponsors are in the C-suite, so they obviously have a different point of view of what they think sponsorship is all about.
Yeah.
But I like the phrase you just used, know who you're dealing with. So if you set the expectations for yourself with with what you're going to expect to get from the sponsor, then you can live through it. So what I've done in the past is, you know, I've gone into the CEO's office with my list of things I'm expecting a sponsor to do, but not taking it as an approach of sponsors are responsible for this. It's a case of what I need down here. I'm having a little bit of challenge. Can you take on this activity or find somebody to do this activity and make sure we get clearance for, you know, whatever it is that's stopping us. So it becomes more of a discussion.
softly.
As opposed, you know, I'm manipulating. There's no doubt about it. My role is a manipulator. But if you go in and say, okay, as a sponsor, you're responsible for this, I know I'm not going to get what I want out of it. But if I go in with the, you know, I'm challenged, I need some help here, and perhaps you know somebody who can do this for you. And it seems to have worked. And they've taken on those tasks. So I do like that phrase you use, you know who you're dealing with. And that applies to right across the team, let alone sponsors.
Oh yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, no, and I have seen. I mean, a couple of organisations I've done some work with. I mean, they actually have a sponsor charter, which the sponsor themselves signs when they take on a project. Now, these are very enlightened organisations, and they do have a proper, almost a university of sponsorship development, along with all the other roles to do with project management, etc. So they're quite well advanced that area. But I did kind of like that, like just a reminder that this is, you're picking up a new project, and could you just make sure you're happy with the responsibilities and you have the time for it, and thank you very much. Again, I can see that not working in so many other organisations, though. But knowing what you're dealing with, I kind of. Gabrielle?
Yeah, I just want to add is when the colleague just earlier said you can make do, and I had 2 projects in the same organization, similar teams, but in one case a very engaged sponsor, and in the other case quite an absent sponsor. And the difference in business benefits and outcomes were significant. And it really highlighted to me the importance of the project sponsor. Because we were able to execute faster, we were on time, we had a better solution at the end of it all, because we had that engagement and we had that line into what the C-level truly thinks of the project and what they expected. So I couldn't agree more with you in terms of how important sponsorship is, because I have experienced it on what a difference it can make.
Well, yeah, it's a great comparison, having two projects so close together and such different outcomes. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And I talk, when I talk to people, I kind of joke a little bit around this, but I think when you go to meet your sponsor for the first time, because you may not have worked with them beforehand, then I think the first thing you should do is find something out about them. And I joke in my keynotes about that doesn't mean go and find or hire a private detective to take embarrassing pictures of them for blackmail purposes later, so you can get your own way. What it means is, well, have they sponsored other projects? And if so, go and talk to the project managers who've worked with them in the past and find out a little bit about what their style is, what their expectations are, what their experience is, what's good about them, what's bad about them, their strengths and weaknesses. And then you can go into that first meeting with your new project sponsor, and in that new relationship between sponsor and yourself, as prepared as you can be. And I think the second thing is, I think you touched on it, Gabrielle, about the fact of, it's almost their belief or their commitment in the project. It makes a huge difference. And so I've found that if you go into that first meeting with your project sponsor and you don't start talking about the hard facts, the deadlines, the milestones, all those kind of things, that will come. But if you start off by trying to uncover how they feel about the project. So if you ask them very open questions around what are their hopes and what are their fears or concerns are about this project, because if they can talk well and like it's almost like they can talk in a kind of energized way about what they hope this project is going to deliver for the business and the people, the end users, etc., the stakeholders, then they're behind the project, they believe in it, as opposed to they've just been given this project to look after because it's their turn to get the next project. And unfortunately that happens in organizations quite a lot as well. People just, sponsors are allocated because it's their turn. So if you ask them what their hopes are, and if you ask them what their fears or their concerns or their worries are, they'll also talk to you about what truly, what truly is it that you think there are the risks there, as far as they're concerned, the consequences of failure or potentially, competing projects on the timeline as you look ahead, those sort of things. So very open questions, hopes and fears, that I find uncovers a lot about the attitude and the actual involvement of this particular project sponsor. And it doesn't always work. Again, some people just want to go straight to the detail, the facts, the figures, the mechanics, if you like. But if you can have that conversation, it's quite a good insight for you as a project manager. Whoa. Hello, Jim. Jim. Okay, I've just switched it into lecture mode. Jim, I think we're getting a lot of feedback from you. I'm going to open it up again, and you'll have to unmute yourself again, I think. No, we're still getting a huge amount of feedback, Jim. I'm not sure if you can check that before you try and unmute again. Whilst Jim's looking at that, anybody else have any other comments?
This is Clark. I had a question for Gabriella, actually.
Okay, fine.
Gabriella, you said you had in the same company 2 different experiences.
Yeah.
I would hope that would set off a light bulb moment with that company. You say, gee, here's the value of having an engaged project manager, and maybe with some specific returns. Did you get any feedback from other executives in the company?
I think it was very obvious. It was a larger manufacturing client. And it was because I had the same steering committee basically on both projects. So it became very obvious. The light bulb is, I think the challenge is that just too many organizations embark onto too many projects and they cannot handle them all. And project sponsors are sometimes pulled into so many different directions. I believe a project sponsor shouldn't sponsor more than 2 or 3 projects because you cannot sponsor more significant activities well. If otherwise you're running yourself too thin. So I think we are right on with this that we need better a better training for sponsors. For project sponsors, and I think that's extremely hard and cannot be done by the project manager themselves. It needs to be somebody from the outside that provides that.
Thanks. Good point.
Okay. So I was just looking at the chat now because I think Caroline was trying to say something. I don't think you can hear me. I want to say thank you. So many great takeaways. Okay, thanks, Caroline, for that. Tarek says thank you. They're going to check the checklist when I post it. Jim, are you trying to talk to us now?
Hi, Peter.
Hey, how you doing?
Sorry about the echo before. One of the questions that I would ask is, it's very clear that we've all had good sponsors. It's all very clear that we've had not so good sponsors. We talk about training sponsors. You reference a list of maybe 16 to 17 topics that they should be responsible for. And like anything else, there's probably 3 to 4 to 5 that are crucial that they perform. My question would be, as project managers, who can we escalate this to? If we've got sponsors that aren't necessarily performing what they need to do, it's probably not the PMO. It may not be the steering committee because the steering committee may not be holding up their responsibilities as well. Who can we escalate this to?
Well, from my point of view, I think it's a difficult one. Certainly, I mean, it depends how strong a PMO you've got. For example, you can certainly go to your PMO if you have one for some advice and guidance. And then as far as escalating is concerned, I mean, if you have collected good relationships with other sponsors, Jim, we're still getting quite a lot of background. Maybe if you could mute.
Will do. Sorry about that.
No problem. No problem. We're all learning on this. It's great. Yeah, I was going to say, yes, I think the first thing was, use your PMO. If the PMO has that level of authority and presence inside the organization, as a place to go. And secondly, I think that you could, if you've worked with other sponsors and have a reasonable relationship with them, you can certainly go to them for some advice and say, well, I'm having this experience with this particular person. Can you advise me, or maybe even can you have a word? You do have to tread very carefully. That's for sure, because at the end of the day, these are not stupid people. These are typically very successful people who have risen up the ranks of the organisation and carry some senior executive level of responsibility, authority, and presence inside organisations. So direct challenging is a very, very difficult thing to do, and it kind of goes back to that. The kind of checklist or what sponsors should do. You don't just point and go, hey, you should be doing all this. You do have to play it very, very carefully and very tactfully, and kind of the way that Mike was talking about. So I don't know. That's two ways of dealing with the PMO and other executive sponsors. If you have that kind of channel, I don't know. Anybody else had any ideas of successes?
knowing that there's this,
What I did on a project is when one of my senior members caused a risk to the project, I continued to manage to highlight the risk at my steering committee meetings. So this it's depersonalizing it, but the risk would stay, the outstanding deliverable stays, because that's what we need to do as project managers to highlight to the organization that our project is not healthy.
Yep. But again, that's a very politically sensitive thing to do then. You're effectively highlighting your sponsor as one of the risks inside your own project.
But you need to do that like any other deliverable that is outstanding. You have to be courageous enough to do it, and you have to do it for your project team because they are the ones that are ultimately suffering.
Yeah, and I agree. It does, and it takes courage to do that. Absolutely. I'm not saying it isn't the right thing to do, but again, I think culturally in some organisations that would be really, really difficult to do. Put something down like that. But I applaud you for being able to do it. Have you got any good experiences of project sponsors? Let's have some sort of positive feedback on this as well. Or is it just generally it is a challenge? Have I described the world as it really is?
Well,
I had some great sponsors. I had some great project sponsors that changed, and I guess that's why I feel so strongly about it. I had in an organization somebody who basically, even through a hallway conversation, triggered a whole series of actions that really saved the project.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, it's good to hear that I know there are good ones out there. Okay, so thanks, Gabrielle. I think, Gerald, you're going to contribute.
Just let me unmute.
Okay, yep, you are unmuted.
Okay, thanks. No, it was just we did have an absentee sponsor, but at least he had a deputy, a very capable deputy who did made up for it at least. So there may be a way to go.
Yeah, that's kind of good. And yes, I mean, I guess that's a good point. These days it's not uncommon to have more than one sponsor. It's quite common to have an IT sponsor and a business sponsor, for example. I did some work for a bank where they had 3 layers of sponsors allocated to any given project. I mean, the reality was it was the lower level, which was still a senior director, was the truly active sponsor, but there was a hierarchy above that person of 2 people that they had to report to and get decision support from. So the world of just having one single sponsor is is still fairly common, but we shouldn't be surprised that there can be a lot more as well. So Tarek is just writing up here, in his experience working in the Middle East, Saudi, mostly flagging an executive sponsor as contributing consistently to a risk would often lead to internal political retribution of an outspoken project manager. I mean, I think it is. It comes back down to the culture. So there are certainly some cultures, some organisations that just is not possible, and it makes it increasingly difficult to deal with that. Other companies, as Gabrielle has demonstrated, will accept that and hopefully will improve as a result. And it kind of comes back down to, well, how do you work with these sponsors for them to become better at what they do? And my argument is constantly, it is, yes, you as a project manager can showcase what the right thing should be, but equally, the real way to do this is to invest outside of the actual project delivery in the capabilities and skills of what it means to be a project sponsor. So, I mean, this is part 1 of 2. Is this a conversation you'd like to continue next week? Would you like to move on? I have some more stuff about, project sponsorship development, the capabilities of a project, what a project sponsor really should be doing, how the fact they're too cool for school, so what on earth do you do, and the project sponsor sort of maturity map. Is this something that the group would find interesting? That's collectively everybody unmuting and going, yay, yes, or no.
Yes.
Absolutely. All right. Yes. Colin says yes. Absolutely. Tarek says yes. All right. So that will be the plan for next week. Excellent. And Michael, good. All right. Well, we'll do that. Are there any final points from people? Is there anything else you want to raise at this point? Caroline's agreed. Grace agreed. Everybody wants it. Great.
Just one other point is on how important that sponsor is. On a different tribe call, we were talking about on how many projects get canceled. And they get canceled before this value is being realized. I think that's also a sign that a project sponsor is truly engaged. So it's not just that we have poor results. Some projects never come to fruition because the project sponsor is not engaged.
Yep, I agree. I think it's a critical role, you know, and I'll also talk about the balanced sponsor, you know, what they should be. It's not, you know, there's 4 attributes I believe that a good sponsor has, and the project manager needs to recognise that sponsor has. So yeah, absolutely. And I can see also, you know, potentially add steering committees and stuff like that. Yep. Okay. Cool. All right. Final comments from anybody? No? Okay, so action for me is I will put that checklist up there. I'll go and do that now. And we will talk more about project sponsorship next week and keep the conversation going. So thank you very much. Please do, if you're friends with other people inside the tribe, reach out to them and tell them that we're having some fun conversations, and to join the Working Smarter group as well. People can be as member of as many groups as they like. And I will speak to you all next week. Thank you. Stay safe.